What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. Alright, so in this particular video, I'm going to start a 10-part series of my 10 greatest coaches in the history of NBA, starting from number 10 and going all the way to number 1. And I'm going to have more time to do this as we go to the finals and there's less games every day, and especially after the playoffs are over, and I have more time to talk about other things. But I have a lot of requests: top 10 coaches, top 10 ABA players. I think I had a video request that I didn't get to yet, where it's top 10 defensive players of all time. There's a lot of things that I haven't been able to get to because I'm kind of swamped with other requests. So that will give me some video topics to cover during the off season. But I'm going to go ahead and start with this one. So number 10, I have Bill Fitch. Now, when you look at his overall record, 944 victories, but 1,106 losses, you start to say to yourself, well, how in the world can this guy be a top 10 coach of all time? Back in 1998, he was voted as a top 10 all-time coach. Now, magically, when they do an update of this list a couple of years ago, I think it was the top 15 coaches, Bill Fitch disappeared. And that's because people, number one, don't know who he is. And a lot of these guys are analytic nerds, and they just look at stats. They look at win percentages and championships, and they determine that as you being a great coach. And not understanding that sometimes you can be in a situation where you have a ready-made championship team because someone else was the coach A to coach B, or a coach from point B to point C, and you get dropped to a situation where this team has already reached that pinnacle, or they reached that point where they figured it out, and then you get put in a situation where you get all this praise. But Bill Fitch, his specialty was to go to struggling franchises and to turn them around. And almost every time he was able to do that. So prior to his NBA career, he coached in the college ranks starting in, I believe, 1958, I believe it was. 1956. Started in 1956. He was an assistant. And then ultimately he became a head coach and coached in different universities like Minnesota and Bowling Green in North Dakota. He reached the NBA by 1970. He was offered the head coaching position for the expansion Cleveland Cavaliers. He was hired on March 19th, 1970 for the 1970-71 season, which was their first season in the NBA. Their first season, they only won 15 games. But then by the third season, they won 32 games. You got to remember, the 70s were a very competitive decade. We didn't really have one dominant team winning it all every year or going to the finals every year. So that made the NBA a lot more competitive. So you didn't have a lot of 60-win teams. But at the same time, you didn't really have a lot of teams that won less than 30 games. So that goes to show you how poor the Cavaliers were at that time. But by 1974-75, they had won 40 games. And then the pinnacle of Bill Fitch's career with Cleveland came in 1975-76. That season, that team, the Miracle of Richfield, was led by Austin Carr, who had become the team leader. They also on their team, they had Bingo Smith, Jim Chonis, Campy Russell, and an older Nate Thurman. That year they won 49 games, and that would stay the franchise record until, I believe, the 88-89 season, and they won the Central Division title. As a matter of fact, that year they defeated the then defending Eastern Conference champion Washington Bullets in 7 games to advance to the conference finals, where they would play the Boston Celtics. Now, ultimately, they lost to the Boston Celtics in 6, but their starting center, Jim Chonis, had been sidelined with a broken foot just 2 days before that conference final started. For the season, he had played in all 82 games and had averaged 16 points and 9 rebounds. So he was sorely missed in that conference series. And perhaps he would have been a difference between them winning and losing, but you'll never know. After that, the Cavaliers did not win another playoff series until 1991-92, the year that they made it all the way to the conference finals, losing to the Bulls. Fitch led the team to 2 more playoff berths, but in May of 1979, he resigned. In May of 1979, shortly after resigning, that same month after resigning from the Cavaliers, he was hired by the Boston Celtics. Now, at that time, Boston was at a low point. Hondo Havlicek had retired, and Dave Cowens had retired as a player and had coached them to a 29-53 record the year prior, 1978-79. Bill Fitch helped to lead the team from 29 victories to 61 wins his initial year in Boston. Now, of course, it has to be mentioned that was also the first year Larry Bird joined the team. But Larry Bird also had this to say about Bill Fitch, that Bill Fitch had more influence on him as a player than any other coach he's ever coached for. Bill Fitch was a former drill instructor in the U.S. Marine Corps, and Bill Fitch was the one that helped instill in Larry Bird, who already had a tight regimen. He's the one that instilled in Larry Bird discipline and the intense practice that he had. So whenever you keep hearing these idiots, these nitwits like Nick Wright talk about all Larry Bird did was drink beer and eat pizza, whatever, and smoke cigarettes, it's just a fucking lie. Larry Bird had a very intense workout regimen to keep himself in shape. That's one of the reasons why he was so great, because Bird wasn't the most athletic, but he did have incredible stamina. So, just want to put that out there. The first year, they lost in the conference finals to the Philadelphia 76ers in 5 games. But Bill Fitch won his second Coach of the Year award that season, as well as Larry Bird winning Rookie of the Year. In his second season, 80-81 with Boston, the Celtics drafted Kevin McHale and acquired Robert Parrish, both through a trade with the Golden State Warriors. Bill Fitch's team won 62 games that year, along with a second Atlantic Division title. That year, in the conference finals, they went on to come back from a 3-1 deficit to the Philadelphia 76ers to win in 7 games, and ultimately they defeated the Houston Rockets in 6 games to win the 81 finals, Boston's first title since 1976, and Bill Fitch's first and only NBA championship. Bill Fitch led the Celtics to a third consecutive Atlantic Division title in 81-82 while winning 63 games. Although that year they lost the conference finals to the Sixers in 7 games. The next year, in 82-83, Boston win total dropped a bit from 63 to 56, and they finished second in the Atlantic Division and were defeated by the Milwaukee Bucks in 4 games. It was swept by Milwaukee in 4 games. In May of 1983, he resigned from the Celtics. The reasons why was because of team owners Harry T. Maguire Jr.'s announcement that he was selling the team due to difficulties with Delaware North, the owners of the Boston Garden, as the last straw despite Fitch having 3 years left on his contract. In other words, he didn't get along with management very well. The very next month, Bill Fitch signed with the Houston Rockets, taking over for head coach Dale Harris, who had managed the team to just 14 wins, 14-68 the prior season. The 83-84 Houston Rockets season also had to be the first season with Ralph Sampson on the team. They won 29 games that year, so they improved from 14 to 29 victories. The next season was the season in which the Rockets drafted Akeem Olajuwon, and the team responded with 48 victories in the playoff berth, although they were beaten in 5 games by the Utah Jazz. His next season, his third season with the Rockets, was the best season with the team as they won the Midwest Division title along with the Western Conference title after defeating the Lakers in 5 games. They met Bill Fitch's old team, the Boston Celtics, in the '86 finals. Boston beat them in 6 games to win the finals. I will say this, though. Had Akeem Olajuwon got any consistent help from his teammates, that being Robert Reed primarily and Ralph Sampson in that finals, they could have potentially beaten Boston, because even without those guys having great, they actually had terrible series, especially Ralph Sampson, but they still were able to win 2 games against the Boston Celtics that year in the '86 finals. Bill Fitch, following 2 seasons at the playoff berths, although they did not advance past the conference semifinals. Bill Fitch was fired on June 6 of 1988. 2 months later, actually a year later, Bill Fitch, in August of 1989, Bill Fitch was hired by the New Jersey Nets, replacing former NBA great Willis Reed, who had gone 26-56 the prior season. The team acquired Sam Bowie on draft day in order to try and start a rebuilding process, although the team just went 17-65 that season, the fewest wins for the Nets since joining the NBA. But Bill Fitch gradually helped to raise the team up, acquiring Derek Coleman, Drazen Petrovic, and Terry Mills, helping the team qualify for a playoff berth in 1991-1992 season. The team went to the playoffs with a losing record of 40-42, 6th best in the 14-team Eastern Conference. They lost in the first round to Fitch's old team, the Cavaliers, in 4 games. In May of 1992, he resigned as head coach of the team. In the 1994 offseason, Bill Fitch was hired by the Clippers, replacing Bob Weiss, who had gone 27-55 the previous year. In 4 seasons with the team, he could not reverse the tide of a franchise that had gone on a downward spiral since making the playoffs in consecutive seasons in 92 and 93. However, he led them to a playoff berth once, doing so in the 96-97 season, which would be the last playoff berth for them in almost a decade, although they were swept in the first round by the Utah Jazz. They made the playoffs despite going 36-56, qualifying by just 2 games. The following season was not very good, and the team finished 17-65, the worst season since finishing with that same record in the 94-95 season. 2 days after the season ended, Fitch was fired on April 20th, 1998. Fitch's most losses record with NBA had the most losses record in NBA history with 1,106, and that record stood for 5 years until Lenny Wilkins broke his mark during the 2002-2003 season while coaching for the Raptors. And like I said before, man, his win-loss record is not very good. It was not very good. But he maximized the talent level and the players he played with. And it wasn't just about wins and losses with Bill Fitch. It was about him teaching young men how to be men, how to conduct themselves as players, how to approach games from a mental perspective, to make these guys tougher, to give them edges, and not just think that you can always beat teams based on talent level alone. And when you think of all the players that he's coached over the years, most of them, almost all of them, were exemplary individuals, and I don't think any of them had anything negative to say about Bill Fitch as a coach or as a person. He was old school. You know, he was an old school coach back when coaches could be coaches and lead the team. He wouldn't fit in today's NBA at all. And it saddened me when I found out that he passed away last year at the age of 89. And when you look at his resume, he's in the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame as a head coach. He was named one of the top 10 coaches in NBA history back in 1998. Two-time NBA Coach of the Year winner. He was the 1982 NBA All-Star Game head coach for the Eastern Conference. And he won a championship as a head coach in the 80-81 season. And in the NBA, he had 5 different stints with different teams. From 1970 to 79, I guess that was his longest stint ever with one particular team. He coached the Cleveland Cavaliers. From 79 to 83, he coached the Celtics. From 83 to 88, the Houston Rockets. From 89 to 92, the New Jersey Nets. And from 1994 to 1998, he coached the Los Angeles Clippers. And just want to go ahead and do a video talking about Bill Fitch, and a guy that I think is one of the top 10 players, one of the top 10 coaches in the history of the NBA. Tell me what you guys think.